Okay, let's go. Back today with average array from Codewars, and it's a Python exercise. That's what it is. Now let's look at really what it is and look at the instructions. Create a function that takes a 2D, two-dimensional array as input and outputs another array that contains the average values for the numbers in the nested arrays at the corresponding indexes. The function should also work with negative numbers and floats. Let's look at an example to really clear this one up. Create a function that takes a 2D array as input, outputs another array that contains average values for the numbers at corresponding indexes. Looking at the first example, we have, yes, a two-dimensional list, and we've got sublists, and then it stacks them here, where how it ends up is we get the averages of the values at corresponding indexes, really, in corresponding indexes of each sublist. So really, we're getting the averages of the columns. Now if we stack the two subarrays like this, average of 1, 5, average of 2, 6, 3, 7, and so on. And when we get the averages of the columns, we're going to put them in a flat one-dimensional list where it's going to be each element is going to be the average of that column. So index 0 of my final list is going to be the average of column 0. So column 0's average corresponds to element 0 in the new list. So that is what we're going to do. Scrolling down again to look at, well, not again, but scrolling down to look at the next example. You got a multi-list list here, and if you stack it up right here, we see that let's just isolate on column 0. You get the average of 2, 12, 9, 67. That average is 22.5. So really looking at this, you see that these averages, like I said, are the averages of the columns. So that is what we're going to need to do in this exercise. We're going to take our two-dimensional list and get the averages of the columns. We're really just going to need to loop a certain way in order to get the column values isolated, I guess, properly, so we can add them together and get an average. I'm now going to pull over and pull out PyCharm, and we'll get started with this sucker. Already got my function header, and I'm going to create a list to put my averages into, because this is going to take in a two-dimensional list. It is going to return a one-dimensional list, so I need a one-dimensional list for that return. And now I'm going to create a nested loop, but my nested loop is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a column major nested loop. Column major is, I guess you could say, the opposite of row major. A typical nested loop that you're going to use to loop through a two-dimensional list is going to be row major, where on the outer loop you are going row by row, like row 0 to row whatever, and then on the inner loop you're going column by column, which is across. With the column major loop, you're going to go columns, which is across on the outer, And on the inner loop, you're going to go rows, which is up and down. Well, actually, it really translates to the opposite of that, but yeah, it's kind of confusing, I guess. When you're looping the columns, you're actually going across. When you're looping the rows, you're going up and down. Yeah. So try to digest that. But we'll just make the dang loop. Or loops, actually. And I'm going to use a somewhat descriptive variable name for my range loop. When you do column major looping, you're going to loop through, or your limit is going to be the length of one row. I'm going to use row 0 because I'm pretty much guaranteed that there's going to be a row 0. Most of the time there's going to be one, so I get the length of that one. And I'm pretty sure all the rows are going to be the same length, so it doesn't matter which one I use. So I'm going to get that, and then as I loop, I'm going to need to be able to get an average. I'm going to need to get a sum of all the column values. So I'm going to create a variable to get that sum. Then I'm going to do my row loop. And for the row loop, I'm going to loop the number of rows, which will be the length of the two-dimensional list. And inside the row loop, I'm going up and down in my inner loop, so it's going to allow me to get the column values. And for each column value, I need to add it to my sum because I'm getting a sum of these column values to get an average. So I'm going to add to my temp sum, and going to double index row call, and then after the inner loop is complete, I'm going to have a sum of a column. And what I want to do with that sum of the column is take the sum, get the average, and then append that to my average list. So I'm going to do all that stuff after the inner loop is complete. And this is wrong. It's not sum list, it's average list. I'm going to divide by the length of something. What is it? Yeah, it'll be the length of the list, because that's going to give me the number of rows, which will be the number of elements in a column. That is right. And for Python, I'm going to use the single slash because I may get floats in this, and they said you need to be able to handle floats in this function. If I did the double slash, it's going to force integer division, which will make floats integers, and it'll mess up my return value. All right, moving along, and once the outer loop is complete, I'm going to have all my averages in a one-dimensional list, so I can go ahead and return my average list. Now it's time for a test case. Let's see what we got over here. Test case, test case. Let's take this one. I got the negative values. Comment comment out, comment in. All right, so I'll print the return. There's my test data. So yeah, what we should get is this test data should result in this list. Let her rip, let her rip. Check this real quick. I just want to give a final check before we hit the ignition, so to speak. All right, let's take a look here. So yeah, my values come out as floats because of the division, but the values are correct. 0, 0, 1, 5, negative 4.5. This looks good, so I'm gonna pop it into Codewars and see if it passes. Now for the real test. Pop it in there, let's go, let's go. Looks good. Looks good, okay. We got it. Show you the code once more. Yeah, there's a solution. So take a two-dimensional list, get the averages of the column values, put that in a one-dimensional list, and return it. That is how you do it. That is it for average array. That is it for the video. And you guys get out there and crush it today. Have a great one. I'll talk to you soon.